All right, welcome back to the Peanut Gallery. I have with me today a good buddy of mine, Brother Doyle.
Good morning, Brother Lowen. How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you for having me.
No, we're really glad you could join us.
It's great to be here.
We're all about celebrity guests around here.
Well, then you are certain to be let down today.
Well, no, the other guy couldn't make it, but we are very excited.
I know, I was really looking forward to him, too. When I found out it was me, I felt ripped off.
I know, right? But we'll make the best of it. I mean, we got what we got.
But isn't that what you always have to do when I'm in the room?
But listen.
Yes.
Listen, before we get into things, let's talk about why we're really here.
Okay.
All right.
I'd like to know.
So this week, we wanted to do a specific focus on Family Central.
Okay.
Which has been a huge part of your life, a huge part of what we as a church, what we as a group of individuals trying to make our community better. That's a huge part of what we're doing right now. So we want to talk about that, but even a little bit more important than that, you've come up with a new jingle. You didn't like our lyricless jingle, so
I don't know. I don't know that I don't know that I ever described as not liking it. I just thought you guys can do better. Okay, now I think he gave you a solid foundation. If you were to add in something like Peanut Gallery in the morning, you could go further with it. I don't know. I think it's something that Pat and Albert are going to have to pick up and run with a little bit. I just wanted to give you a starting point.
Okay, thank you, Sean. I appreciate it.
So now that we have the most important parts all out of the way, and we've got a new jingle and things are going well. So talk to us. Doyle, that's a pretty famous name in Aylmer. I guess depending on which circles you ran with, how much you needed a lawyer. Mm-hmm. But tell us a little bit. So you grew up in Aylmer, a little bit of your background, and then maybe walk us through kind of how you ended up back in Aylmer.
Okay. As you are alluding to, I was born and raised in Aylmer. I often joke and say I spent my first 20 years here. Left and then spent 20 years trying to return to Aylmer. So yeah, my father is Mike Doyle. Depending upon how anybody's experience with Mike, I like him. He was awfully good to me, and so yeah, the Doyle name has been around Aylmer. I think he practiced for about 40 years, maybe 43 years or something ridiculous like that on the corner over right in behind our building, which is kind of cool. I often like to just drive by and sort of see the old man's name there, and remember that he's contributed before anyone else, before I did or anything. It's just kind of cool. So yeah, I was raised here in Aylmer. Played all my minor sports here in Aylmer. Went to East Elgin, Go Eagles football, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Say the two guys who've never played football over here. But anyways,
Hey, I played football in 10th grade.
You did not.
I did. I was a defensive end.
What?
Atta boy,
No.
I did.
Okay. Well, you never know what you're going to learn.
Well, that's good for you. Outstanding. And fan support is crucial to any team.
Right. But, I couldn't even make it as a water boy, so we did try,
So yeah, I left Aylmer when I was about 20, 21, somewhere in there, I think. To sow those wild oats, to get out there and see what the world had to offer. I was a young construction worker, so I bounced around to different jobs in different cities. I lived up north a little bit in Powassan. London, St. Thomas, all the general areas around here, you kind of go where the work takes you. And then I got injured. So during the course of that injury, they do something called a psychovocational evaluation, which is a great big word for figuring out it's a very large word to figure out, or they ask you a series of questions to figure out what you might be adept at doing.
Okay.
So they came up with two things for me. One was engineering and one was social work. Two absolute polar opposites of a spectrum. I told them that I hated mathematics. They encouraged me to go into engineering, so I did. So upon upgrading math to approach engineering at the University of Western Ontario, which is far, far beyond the grasp of Sean Doyle, I'm just going to tell everyone that right now.
Well, I've never heard this before, so I've even learned things here.
Yeah, this is all true stuff. So I started the upgrading portion of the mathematics that would be required for me to enter the University of Western Ontario and begin engineering. And they had thought that this was a good idea because of my construction background.
Yeah.
What they didn't realize is that although my tape measure mathematics are outstanding, I was maybe not a Western candidate. All right? So I struggled through that. I began to have nightmares about numbers and things like that, and went, hey, you know what? Why don't I just call them back and say, listen, I think I might end up being a social worker if you guys are still cool with that. So I got into the Child and Youth Work program at Fanshawe, and from there, I worked a little bit at places like Janae Detention and things like that, working with at-risk youth and, imprisoned youth at that point. I worked at a couple of group homes briefly, and then I ran the Talbot Teen Center at St. Thomas for about 5 years. That was a really great experience with fundraising and kids and keeping a spot like that alive, so to speak, figuring out different ways to keep the building full, figuring out what the kids needed and how to make sure that we could do that, and pulling a community together to help people. So I was fairly successful at that, successful enough that the umbrella company, which is Employment Services Elgin, said, why don't you come over here? The Ontario government is rolling out something called the Youth Job Connection, and we think you would be an ideal candidate to support those at-risk youth that are going into this program and coach them through their new employment journey.
Yeah.
That was 2 of the more interesting years a fella could ever in social work could describe. I've got millions of stories about just where people, it's really interesting, where people start out. I mean, not knowing even, there was kids in that program that didn't know how to tell time.
Oh, really?
Right? There was kids that missed work because their hair dye hadn't set yet. And just beginning to understand that these are some of the things that, I'm not saying that an entire generation suffers from or anything like that, because I'm not. But these are some of the things that I think we've overlooked sometimes, or how alienated or stranded certain youth may have been. I began to realize that there was sort of a pattern of that.
Right.
So after the Teen Center, I went over and worked in the Youth Job Connection program, and then I was offered the opportunity to come down here to Aylmer, back to where it all began, so to speak.
So just out of curiosity,
yes.
Had you ever been at the Central before it was Family
Never
Central?
Never once. I was far too busy with church functions, bakes and things like that. No, I can't lie to my pastor. Yes, I was familiar with the Central. I think you alluded to, depends on what circles you ran in and things like that, what the last name Doyle might mean to you in the town of Aylmer. So I think that's a fair enough statement.
All right, good. Sorry,
but thanks.
Sorry, I didn't know. I thought this was relevant information. No, it's very cool with the youth thing, and what I wanted to talk about with that, because that kind of leads us into some of the stuff we're doing with FCA now. Mm-hmm. You make assumptions about basic tools that people have that they don't necessarily have. Yeah. I remember the first time we took in somebody who was an older teenager, and as he was graduating high school and moving on, you begin to realize the amount of things that they don't have, basics that I did. So when I wanted to go to college, getting a loan, piece of cake, because I got parents who would be like, well, sign here. There's all sorts of little details like that if you come from a normal, maybe normal is the wrong word, but if you come from a healthy home, whatever that normal looks like to you, but if you come from a place where you got support and you got people around you, those are basics that you just take for granted. And then you look at some of these teenagers and go, why aren't you doing anything with your life? And they've never even been taught the basics of time management, the basics of what a boss is looking at. So there's all those little things that we just make assumptions about.
Well, it's quite a statement when you say, weren't you doing anything with your life? We miss all of these incredibly small details, and then we ask them to take on a humongous project.
Right.
What are you doing with your life? Nothing? Well, we didn't. We've missed some pretty crucial steps. Yeah. And I think that's a combination of all of us, with the kids that I came across and some of the experiences that I've had with FCA as well. I don't think there's any person that ever woke up one morning and said, I'd like to be disengaged. I'd like to be alienated. I'd like to be left alone. Please and thank you. Well, I know some people do say that, but we get them to come around.
Right.
But you know what I mean. Yeah. I don't think anybody wakes up and says, you know what I'd really like to do today is be right behind the 8-ball with really no vision of how to get out from behind there or ability to reach out to someone because I'm kind of paralyzed with my own stuff. Be that anxiety or depression or this or that. And my question is when I look at a youth or any adult even, because this isn't just youth stuff. I've had to show a person in their 30s about the importance of showing up for time for work, how to set an alarm clock, things of that very basic stuff. Yeah. But it is just really, really interesting to see what we can miss along the way. And I think the world is pretty open to looking and saying, well, they just didn't put forth an effort, or they just didn't pay attention when they needed to, or they didn't ask the right questions, or whatever the case may be.
But I think this is, again, going back to, it's been a learning process. And so in a second here, I want you to kind of walk us through how we got to where we're at, because the program was very different when you first started. But some of that is a learning thing. And I think especially with poverty, people make giant assumptions about the ease of it. And some of it is. Some of the people literally need to make a few better decisions.
That's right.
Typically, you end up with a much longer story, and you end up with much longer amount of detail. Some of it, at least we've discovered, some of it is medical health.
Yeah.
Some of it is undiagnosed mental health. Some of it is just they've been in circles where the advice they were given was so poor it led them down to terrible ideas. So it's just not quite as easy. And I think that's where the program that kind of we've developed for at least our region here has been pretty cool.
Yeah.
So let's start with then. So you come from employment services.
Yep.
You get suckered into coming down and working for us. So maybe it kind of summarize a little bit what it was when you began, or kind of what you thought, and then let's end off with kind of what the program is now, and then we can go from there.
So when I began, I looked at it and I thought that it was really quite incredible, because it's like anything else on paper. That you see a group of really good-hearted people, people that have the best of intentions going, putting a program down on paper and saying, here's the clientele that we'd like to help. Here's the types of things we see ourselves being able to do. And it really flowed beautifully. It was well put together. It was well thought out. There was all kinds of barriers and hurdles and things like that were expected, and were able to be overcome and all that stuff. But it turned out to a degree that wasn't what was needed. And the neat thing that has been, I mean, it was a great foundational start. But I think for any real program like ours, you have to be able to sort of flex and change and shift with times.
Right. And so just a little backdrop. Sorry, I should have done this before, but so the program that we started, we didn't really know who to copy or what exactly to do. Yeah. We had 8 apartments. We wanted to do something that wasn't just a handout.
Right.
We didn't want it to be low-income housing.
Yeah.
So we weren't 100% sure. And now, I mean, the longer we've been in this, the more you realize there were actually people we could have gone to that were running stuff that's similar to us. But back then, we didn't know.
Right.
And so we had a few people involved, and we ended up partnering with Fresh Start.
Yeah.
And so Lori Wall came up with a lot of this stuff, and we had an idea.
Yeah.
But just like you're saying, that idea, once it gets fleshed out and there's actually people instead of just statistics in there, you start realizing maybe this isn't exactly the way we had envisioned this to be.
Well, and I think, I mean, it's all relative in terms of what you see. So what I think is a hand up for somebody might be completely different than what someone else thinks a hand up is, right? So some people would look at some of the stuff that we are trying to do or trying to help people accomplish and say, well, that's just like you might be doing too much, or you know what I mean? There's always room for interpretation in those things. But I think really, as you were saying, when we started the program with Lori Wall and Fresh Start's assistance and everything else like that, that was all done prior to me coming along. And then and the idea at that point was to just keep it very simple, to keep the 8 apartments that we had upstairs, to make sure that we were serving those 8 individual families or people or whatever the mixture was that we had upstairs. And then just to, if it was somebody who had just had a little bit of a tough go recently or something like that, and we could really kind of pick them up and prop them up and surround them with love and caring and concern and all that we could, and that's a brilliant idea. Right. I love that idea, and I think that probably most grassroots agencies like ours get started right there. But then we started to be able to capture stats, okay, and realize that this was a growing thing, and that there was more complexity to it than just, say, an event happened. That event caused this financial strife, which we were then able to provide lower income housing, help connect them to the, you know what I mean? It became a little more than that. We started to understand things like we're in an opioid crisis. Right. Okay? There's no way that there's some invisible barrier at Rogers Side Road that stops that from coming into Aylmer, Ontario. Okay? And that's just the facts. We saw that. We see that. We're going to continue to see that. That adds a layer right there that takes you completely out of the realm that you were just talking about.
Right. And then the other piece that I think really matters is if you're going to actually help people transform, it's much more complicated than just trying to force them to do something. So if you have them in the program, we say, okay, here's the 12 things you have to do.
Yep.
They leave potentially completely unchanged because they just did what we told them they needed to do.
That's right.
But we didn't want that. We wanted
Right.
them to be able to be transformed so that when they leave the program and they're out on their own, that they are going to be healthy and successful and being able to
100%.
live the life that they were hoping they lived before whatever factor led them astray.
Absolutely. So, and that's where the work comes in, right? Is being able to allow someone to develop a relationship of enough trust that someone will sit at a table with you and truly talk to you about what scares them, talk to you about where they want to be instead of where they are, and have enough courage to admit that they're not where they want to be, and feel safe enough to admit they're not where they want to be. It's an incredibly powerful moment when someone's talking to you and they begin to identify their own issues, okay? The things that have stopped them.
Right.
Because you could sit across the table or and look at anybody and say, as you said, here's the 12 things that I see off the top of my head that are stopping you from being successful, right? You could probably make a list of those things, smack it on the title of a book somewhere and sell a couple million copies of it. 12 ways to guaranteed success. And it would all be lies, all right? And that's why we do individualized things.
Yep.
Okay? Right now the world it's about I shouldn't say the world, that's a pretty broad thing, but dual diagnosis, okay? Dual diagnosis is what is something that you'll hear more and more about, and it's something that you always hear about, but people need to understand it is there's always been debates around what came first, sort of the chicken or the egg or the housing.
It was the egg, but carry on.
the homelessness or the addiction or those types of things. So, and I'm not even certain that those are questions we need answers to. It'd be nice to figure out before I retire, but I don't know that I'll ever really be able to.
Well, and again, I think this goes, if you're trying to solve this problem from getting Justin Trudeau to introduce a legislation that ends all of this, well, for somebody it was mental health. For somebody it was their own choices. For somebody it was relational. For somebody, and so in Aylmer, in our community, it's different than it would be in Brantford, which is different than we're in the middle of Saskatchewan somewhere. And so it really requires for you to be able to go, okay, the theory of how you got there isn't as crucial as understanding the individual as to how you yourself got there.
Yeah.
Not just I brought there, you're going to learn school. This is how, and I think that's where that conversation, the dual diagnosis, which one? I don't know.
Yeah.
The people we've dealt with, some of them, it's just been completely different.
Well, sure. And I mean, again, with that dual diagnosis, it becomes a little bit about, so there's a mental health diagnosis. There might be an addiction issue at the same time. So there's always a lot of things. There's a lot of layers to peel back, and we always want to be careful with that. And we understand that we're not an addictions agency, all right? We're not Canadian Mental Health and things like that. We're an agency that's really designed with, the people I work with, I think, are incredible, absolutely incredible. But we're an agency designed to assist others get to where they need to be. We can do a lot of wonderful in-house work, and I believe in that work wholeheartedly, and we're qualified to do that. But we also understand that, again, in the throes of an opioid crisis, we need to be sending people where they need to go. There's great agencies out there that can look at those things. We need to make sure that we have as many partnerships as we could in the community. And so if we're trying to get people employed and inspire them that there's more to their existence than Ontario Works or things like that, we need to have as many partners in our community as we possibly can, as many warm, friendly faces and comfortable settings as we can create for people to continue to move forward. And one of the biggest parts of that work is moving forward with them, alongside of them, I think one of the great things that we really do is we walk with the people that come in the door. Yep. Okay, so we'll say, here's your particular tailored plan of care for you as an individual. Here are the things that you have expressed to us that you'd like to change in yourself and you'd like to see changed in your world. And we sort of start to connect the dots. Well, it would be beneficial for you to go here or here or here. Okay. And then we don't just hand you a list and say, here's the numbers, make that happen for yourself. Let's call together. Let's go over there together. Oh, I happen to know that service provider and I work very closely with that agency or individual. Let me take you there. I'd love to introduce you to my friend over at this, So I was
going to say, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about was the challenge of system navigation. Because that seems to be, at least, and I'll let you expand and say, but it seems to be one of the biggest challenges. So whether you're looking for help or trying to get help for someone, even figuring out, even if there are programs, a lot of the stuff when you first started working, you'd give out all these acronyms and agencies. I've never heard of these things, right? So if you don't know, you don't know. Talk to me about system navigation and kind of what that plays into this.
Well, I think system navigation is just, it's important to have a real working knowledge of the things that are in your community, all right? Because again, we don't do it all. And any agencies that pretends they're standalone, it's my opinion they shouldn't, and I don't think any of them do. We're done working in silos. So the system navigation part is about making those, understanding what the person needs, and then finding that organization. It's been over the last year, and I know that all conversations somehow or another now end up leading into the COVID thing, and I was going to try to really steer out of that. Over the last year, it has presented a challenge because of COVID, but there's also been some other neat things too. Like people have began to understand that some of the red tape, I think, that's put in front of us that slow down these connections and slow down agencies' ability to work with others and things like that have been a little bit foregone. Therefore, things could actually happen somewhat faster. At least initially, I found that when this all started. But yeah, making those connections and getting people plugged into those agencies and stuff is and having that conversation almost on a daily basis if need be, right? So tell me about the conversation you had with so-and-so at CMHA or something like that. And then you can hear what they picked out of that. And always remembering too, and I did want to point this out, Albert, that we always take a strength-based approach. Like our idea is never to come in and judge anybody. Right. We're not about that at all. All right. We want to find out how to enhance the strengths that you already have. Yeah.
Because people are typically hard enough on themselves. They don't actually need, if they're coming to us for help, they're not in a place where they're like, my life's going great. I don't know why I'm here.
That's right. And the best thing, I'm saying that facetiously, obviously, is to look at them and say, well, how could you put yourself in this spot?
Right.
There is an accountability piece. All right. I don't think you can ever look at one person and say, though, there's the one event that led to every other event that put you in a spot. And people will look at that, just say in addiction. People will say, okay, well, that one thing, that one time you ate that pill is what led to this life of turmoil. Well, I want to go deeper than that. Right. Okay, that's surface stuff. At Family Central, we want to know why you took that pill to begin with. Right. Tell me about you. Tell me about what you're comfortable with, but really tell me about you. And let's not waste any of that time because we only got so much of it together. Yeah. Let's make the best of the time, and let's be honest with one another. And let's find out why you took that pill. Okay, so let's not judge the fact that you did.
As we're going to run out of time here,
sure thing,
shortly. So what we've learned a bunch of things along the way. So people come in, we go with the strength base. You give them the accountability, support, relationship, all that jazz. One of the biggest hindrances that we're running into, that we're trying to work to, and I'd like you to share a little bit, is so the idea with our housing was transitional. So you come in, but the idea is so you get your own place. Because most people, as they get to a place of mental health and get to a place of confidence and they feel good about themselves, you don't want to be living on government assistance, and you certainly don't want to be living in a tiny little apartment in downtown Aylmer.
That's right.
There is no housing, though.
This is the challenge, Albert. You're absolutely correct. We are not only in an opioid crisis, and I did a lot of talking about that, we're also in the throes of a pandemic and housing crisis at the same time. So we've been hit with the triple whammy. Housing in Aylmer right now is, there's a long list. I believe I read in an email the other day that there's about a 10-year waiting list in the city of St. Thomas. There's 1 to 2 year wait lists in other areas, but we are in that 5, 6, depending upon the size of stuff that you're looking for, but 1 and 2 bedrooms are usually at a premium. And if you think about it, a 1-bedroom place, that person is going to pay for that on their own. So there's where you're going to find a lot of your, where we find a housing shortage.
So we found a 4-plex the other day, and so we're like, we should maybe look into investing it. So Patrick and I went out and we thought, it would be pretty cool if we could get 4 units.
Yep.
We could kind of partner with Family Central, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So you go, you take a tour.
Yep.
The prices are so unreal. Yeah. And so what happened was, so you look at it and you go, okay, well, you can't raise rent right now, and you can't do some of that. But even if you could, the amount I would need to charge immediately eliminates anybody who does not have super strong income. And so now you're paying for a little apartment in a fourplex.
Yeah.
You're going to be looking at $1,200 to $1,500 plus utilities. Well, if you're on minimum wage or even slightly above, how are you affording this?
So a great number of the people that come to Family Central, obviously being an employment and education-based program, come to us on Ontario Works because they want to have a greater income. They want to have a more fruitful life. But in the meantime, you tell me, based on what you were just talking about, how it is that you're going to survive in a market right now where the typical rent in Aylmer, Ontario, I believe, is about $1,100 right now. That's standard for a one-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
Ontario Works will give you $450 for your rent portion, I believe, right in that area. Albert, I know somebody's going to listen to this and say it's $417, dummy, but it's right in that area.
I even know who you were quoting there. That was good. I like that.
But it's right in that area. Bottom line is your max OW is going to be about $770 a month, and your max Ontario disability is going to be about $1,100 a month.
Yeah.
So how do you make any of that work? You don't. That's why with programs like ours that are to inspire people and to walk with them and help them get up to the next level in life where they need to be to survive anymore. Right. This isn't necessarily even about, this is about survival.
Yep.
Okay? Like we always want people to thrive. But I mean, when they come to us, at the initial portion of their meeting with us at Family Central, it's, I consider it, we're in emergency mode usually, and we are trying to make sure that we can get this person something to eat and somewhere to sleep at the same time on a budget that's impossible. Right. It's very challenging.
Right. And this is where I think the community piece matters so much. Mm-hmm. If we want to actually help people out, it's going to require more than government. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they have family around that can. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah, that's right.
I think this is part of the challenge of our program is and one of the things we're looking to try to do is to involve the community in a better, more productive way.
Right.
Some of the ideas we've tried haven't worked.
For sure.
And we're going to keep moving forward. Right. But I do really think people... If we don't have the whole circle around you, and I guess it's that wraparound idea again, it's very hard for people. And then with the housing piece, I know you've been looking into a bunch of different ideas because we're going to have to be intentional.
Oh, absolutely.
Because right now, and this is where I get frustrated, but at the same time, I totally understand it. So all these units are being sold. Well, somebody's making a killing right now. I don't blame them. That's fine. No. Do your thing. We're a capitalist society. I get all of that. Yeah. But from my standpoint, I'm not even sure where my kids are going to live. Like, are they going to be able to afford to live in Aylmer? Like, you got to think how much money you need to earn as a a young 19, 20-year-old while you're going to be living at home longer because you're not moving out during school. Well, and even after that, you got to make a good amount of income to live.
And see, if that's not incentive enough for all the parents of Aylmer, Ontario to vigorously support the Family Central Apartments program, do you want your kids to stay home longer?
Do you want them to move out?
Listen, people, I'm really here for you. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that we've been very smart, if I could be so bold as to say, to try to start developing partnerships. And I shouldn't say try to start developing partnerships, but we've been working with ECAP in Aylmer and using their resources to help support people that are in that low income bracket to get first month's rent and things like that. Yep. That's something ECAP's been doing around here since 1969. Yep. They've been, so for us to work with them and for us to work with the food bank to make sure that people have what they need in the meal ticket program so that people are getting fed and can actually go out and get something to eat if they need that. And to our partnership with the East Elgin Housing Initiative and things like that, I agree with you, Albert. I think it takes a well-rounded approach. It's going to take everybody in our community to get it right. Yep. And just having that approach is going to allow us to not necessarily need to look so hard at needing government funding. We can do a little bit more together in-house, and I love that idea anyways.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, we are completely out of time.
Yes, sir.
Doyle, thank you for joining. Thanks for all the work you're doing in town. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And we will talk to you next time.
Okay, thank you.